November 2016, Glasgow, Scotland. I was desperate, I must admit. I had been single and alone for some time, and it was beginning to drive me stir crazy. That's when I met Laura. She came across as a very sweet girl and all, but she was in a hurry to meet me. So I agreed to it. She insisted that we go to the pub, nothing fancy, and dates weren't necessary to her, so I didn't mind this. At first glance, I knew I had been swindled. She looked different from what I had seen before on her Tinder profile, but I did not mind. I was just happy to have a date, and I'm not exactly good looking myself. I gave her a chance to redeem herself. We got to talking, and after a few beers, things started to get more intimate. Before I go further, she was quite an overweight girl with long, dark hair, and she had eyeshadow similar to Amy Winehouse. She said she was a huge fan. I had asked her about her hobbies and her interests and whatnot, but she proceeded to instead ask me to talk more about myself. I told her about my job, and she yawned sarcastically. "Let's talk about your sex life." She had slipped her foot out of her shoe and started rubbing my groin with her bare foot. Needless to say, I was aroused. So yeah, I did not have much to say in that department, as it had been a while since I had sex. I was very honest about this with her. I asked about her sex life, and she said that she has her kinks and that she has done things that I had never imagined. "Want to see what I could do? Let's go to my place." So at this point, I was starting to feel very drunk, which I was amazed at, as I was only on to my fourth pint, but I did have 2 shots, so I narrowed it down to that being the reason. We had waited for a taxi, and she was holding my hand excitedly, whispering into my ear that she was going to do some things to me that I had never experienced before. In a way, I actually couldn't wait to just go to sleep. My head felt heavier than the rest of my body. It was like the ground was moving beneath my feet. The rest was a blur. I could not even remember getting into the taxi, but I do remember falling down the stairs and her being above me, laughing at me. She told me to come on, and I struggled up the stairs, and before I knew it, from what I remember, I was in her bedroom, naked. It was like I had blacked out. I tried to sit up, only to find myself tied to the bed by my arms and my legs. Then she entered the room, dressed in bondage gear. I was deeply aroused but confused at the same time. She performed sex acts on me before having full-on intercourse with me. I lay there, delighted. Don't get me wrong, but something still felt off about it all. I had asked her what she was doing as she began to wrap my legs with cling film. "Shh. Hush now. This is the best bit." I was no longer tied to the bed, but I felt very numb and could not move my arms nor my legs. She kept wrapping me up from my legs upwards. I was screaming at her to stop, and she had placed some cling film in my mouth to shut me up. I was struggling to breathe at this point and had tried my best to dislodge the ball of cling film from my mouth. Eventually, I was totally wrapped from head to toe, and I could barely see outside the cling film. She told me that this was my punishment for being terrible in bed, and that she has many other victims just like me, all wrapped up, waiting to die. She left the room, and I let out some muffled screams. Then I felt myself slowly, very slowly fading away. I woke up the next day and able to breathe. However, there were now people looking at me, and several of them. Apparently, they had removed most of the cling film and had resuscitated me. I was not aware of this until they had told me. It had turned out that I was not actually in Laura's flat, but an old-fashioned hotel. The police were all over me, asking me questions about what had happened. I attempted to show them her Tinder profile, but She had deleted the page. I am grateful to my rescuers that has saved me, but forever traumatized by this incident, and I end up with panic attacks when I see people that are similar to her. It took me a few years to finally be able to trust enough to attempt to go back on dates again, but I am still on the road to recovery mentally. I'm just glad that I am still alive, but wondering if she is still out there and if there are others like me that did not make it. Reddit users commented that this story seemed like the other side to another thread that had sprung up years prior about a horrifying Tinder she-devil. A thread that went as follows. I was just fresh off of a major split up when some friends of mine encouraged me to use Tinder. After witnessing my friend use it himself, I decided to give it a go. What could go wrong? I spent hours on end swiping and swiping. Some matched and some didn't, but it was fun. And then I swiped on Linda and we matched. A decision that I would end up regretting deeply. We spoke for a few weeks on and off and got to know each other. She seemed like a nice enough girl. She was a bit older than me, yet looked a whole lot younger. She was not fussy about going out for a meal or a cinema trip or anything traditionally romantic, so we ended up arranging to meet up at a bar instead. At first glance, she was barely recognizable from her profile picture on Tinder. She actually looked a whole lot older and had clearly gained a lot of weight. Already the first red flag was starting to show. That is not the major problem here though. We got our drinks and got into some good conversations, and we seemed to have a lot in common. Maybe too much. In my instincts, I had the impression that she had perhaps did some research on me and was trying her best to impress me. There came a point of awkward silence. I thought I would say something to kind of break the silence, but she already had beat me to it. Let's talk about sex. I was too stunned to get my head around at how forward and straight to the point she was. She asked me about my sex life and what stuff I'd got up to with my previous partners. We exchanged our stories. To be honest, mine didn't seem half as exciting as her dramatic ones, so I just made stuff up. I never really felt comfortable talking about this to somebody, especially on a first date. It was at this point she would reveal something to me that made me sick from the pits of my stomach. She told me that she liked bondage and that she liked to torture and abuse people just for fun. One story in particular, she told me that she had tricked a man into getting into bed with her, and how shocked he was to lie down on a bed full of thumbtacks. At this point, I was quickly slurping my drink and getting my excuses ready to leave. Then she told me her final story. She told me that only the week before meeting me, she had met a man from Tinder, got him to take her to his own flat. She said that she was well prepared and had a bag full of items in her car of bondage tools. Then to my horror, she told me that she had wrapped him up in cling film over and over again from head to toe until he was almost mummified, and then just left him there on his own in the flat and abandoned him. She laughed and laughed as she impersonated his mumbles and his pleas for help. "He's probably dead by now," she said, chuckling as she sipped her drink. At this point, I decided to just leave. There was no more point in staying. I did not even want to question if this was a sick joke or not. I just got up and I left. She attempted to kiss me, but I swerved out of her way. I just got up and left as soon as I could. Safe to say I never met her again, and hope I never will.